Five, four, three, two, one. What's up, guys? Foxwolf here, and welcome to the top three fights series, episode 3 of the Mr. GLOAT podcast top 3. And today, guys, we're going to be talking about one of the greatest fighters to ever come out from South Africa. A guy that became the first champion in his country, but also went on the lines of his career, not just inside the ring that some people can remember, but also outside of the ring. And if I had to say in a good way, well, I wouldn't say much about it, even though his son is still carrying the torch to try to make it big, even though after his last fight that took place last December the 6th, like a few months ago, ended in split decision draw with his first winless fight. Still, I wish him best of luck. But his father, from the country of Walvis Bay, Nambia, the first ever Nambian world champion, even before Julius Ndongo and his famous horrifying domination loss against the undisputed fight against him and Terrence Crawford, before the forgotten fighters of Paulus Moses and even Paulus Ambunda, sits a guy named Harry the Terminator Simon. And in history, guys, I can't say much about his career other than it had a lot of stuff. He had a lot of hope in his career. And to be honest, I wouldn't say he was much of a great fighter, but a person trying his best to make it through the dark times of his life, no matter how close he was. And even though I have a feeling this might be a 1-hour podcast, there's going to be a lot more information for me to talk about his outside stuff, outside of the ring, other than inside the ring. And we're going to get to it sooner than later. So with that being said, guys, let's begin. So in the history of professional boxers, considering only 4 male fighters in the history from Nambia have actually became world champions. Now, I would say that's good, but it's not all bad considering on who you're speaking to. And technically, the history of professional boxing can throw in a lot of interesting things. And technically, none could be said about the earlier career of Harry Simon. Now, I can't know much about his career, but by his amateur career, he had 121 wins and 9 losses. He did become the All-African Games champion in Cairo in 1991, becoming welterweight gold medalist winner. And in 1992, he was already going to put out his goods starting in Barcelona in the Olympic Games in amateur boxing. And sadly, as in the welterweight, he did not go that far. He lost 11-3 against Anibal Acevedo from the country of Puerto Rico. And sadly for him, even though after he defeated Harry Simon, which was a close fight, 11-3, he did outbox Australian fighter 16-3, and then another fighter from Romania 9-9, 20-9. I don't know what the heck I was talking about. But sadly, he would later lose in the semifinals, or the semifinals, I thought, was against Juan Hernandez Sierra from the country of Cuba. And also, that guy would also lose. And the score was 11-2. Anibal got dominated. And of course, Sierra, well, he lost in the next fight against an Irishman named Michael Carruth, which that guy would later win the gold medal, 13-10. But sadly, the Irishman's pro boxing career didn't do any good from 1994 to 2000. Even though he did fight for an IBO title and the WBO title, which he lost both and started losing fights. And that was, well, just lost a couple fights, but yeah. So my point is, not anyone actually managed to make it out of the welterweight games unhinged, quite frankly. And even Harry Simon's opponent from Puerto Rico didn't have a good record. From 1993 to 2012, he had 13 wins, 11 knockouts, 9 losses, and 1 draw. So it just goes to show you, sometimes when you lose in the first round, well, maybe there's a good reason why you didn't make it farther to the gold medal. And because maybe it wasn't meant to be. But even though those fighters didn't really achieve much in 1992 Barcelona Olympic Games in the welterweight, that one fighter that did make it, and when I said made it, yes, he failed in the first round, but it didn't stop him from being an unbelievable, like, it's just crazy of how his career started. But it didn't start out the way that any other fighters like Clarissa Shields or Alexander Usyk did. And even though I tried to find information about his past life and other information, but there's a lot of dead links out there and 404 error links that are already gone from time, so take that for what you will. I managed to find enough information as best as I can for Harry Simon to understand him. Now, Harry Simon did actually promote 3 shows in his career as a promoter, one in 2018, which we'll get to that a lot later, and one in December of 2023 in Wavis Bay, where he was born, and he was promoting out with his son in that show, just like his other show in 2018, and in November the 9th, also in another building in Wavis Bay. So, and no, his son wasn't there. But yet again, those are the 3 times he ever promoted fights. But his real career in professional boxing didn't really start out interesting than you thought. His first professional fight would come right in January the 26th, 1994, against a guy named Leon van Rensburg. Of course, these fights took place in Africa because at this moment, he would actually fight in Africa for the entirety until 1995, when he moved to the UK in April 13th, 1996, which would be his first fight, and multiple fights after that. So keep that in mind. And mostly, his first fight was a guy with 0 wins and 3 losses. So yeah, these are just tune-up fights to just get him built up. He got first round TKO. And then he took on another fighter that would later become no more than just a journeyman, named Fabricio Dlamini, also from Africa. And not much of a fighter, but he did had some interesting moments in his career. He did become the vacant Transvaal light middleweight champion in 1996, and he did lost the chance to win a title opportunity. Lost the title sometime later the next year, and he started losing fights, and that was the end of his career. But nothing much but just a journeyman type fighter. But yet again, it was the guy's pro debut, taking on Harry Simon. That was 1-0, so nothing much there. But then 3 weeks later, on March the 26th, 3 weeks after that fight, he takes on 2-0 Petros Twala and goes second round TKO. Oh yeah, and his second professional fight was also first round knockout. And then in November the 20th, he gets another fight against a 4-5 fighter in a 4-round fight, knocked him out, finished him in the 4th and final round by TKO. And then in December the 21st, he gets a fight against 3-1-2 record named Paul Lameo and goes second round TKO. At this moment, there's nothing much to build up resumes about this, but that's like Mike Tyson in his early career, so I can't say much about that. But after having 4 good professional fights in his career, his 5th professional fight gave him a big starter-up, taking on Anul Marshall, a person with 11 wins and 1 loss. And surprisingly, that guy's first professional loss took place a few months in October the 9th, when he lost by round 9 TKO for the BSASA Super Welterweight, Boxing South African Super Welterweight. He was the Transvaal light middleweight champion in 1994, middleweight, but Mostly his career came to an end after that fight and then lost against Harry Simon by round 5 TKO in an 8-round fight. Fought one more fight 4 months later, ended in a points draw, and that was it. So it was still a good big first start fight for Harry Simon, and it was a good start. Like I don't know if I found any footage of the fight or something. I didn't look up everything other than his bigger fights. But I tried to look up some of his fights early on, but not a lot. By May the 12th, 2 months later, he takes on a guy with 4 wins, 4 losses, and 2 draws, and goes first round TKO. And then his 8th professional fight became a doozy of a fight named Danny Chavez. 25-4-1 record. And even though his last 2 fights was a draw and a loss at the end, well, I'm not really sure if I would have anything to say about this. As Danny Chavez, partly in America, I wouldn't really say that even by 1988 to 2001, his career wasn't that much. He lost his first professional fight in his 3rd pro fight by first round knockout against a guy with 3 wins and 11 losses. And then 4 fights later, he was taking on barely nobodies and lost his 2nd fight. In his 7th professional fight against a guy with 6 wins and 10 losses. So, and of course he wanted a rematch against that guy sometime later, but yet again, and then of course he lost again. So, yeah, Chavez wasn't much of a fighter to talk about. He was not winning a lot of great fights. He did become the NWBA super welterweight champion back in August of '82, but the damage of his career in those first years the damage was done. Pretty much. Yeah, it just goes to show you. Whether you had it, and he didn't. Heartbreaking. And of course, a guy did talk on a guy named Rene Garcia, another 100th Garcia that we haven't heard of in a long time, if it's not crazy enough. Went on to poke holes to fight for another title. And of course, he did retain that title. And by the way, the NWBA stands for Northwest Boxing Association, super welterweight. And he did retain again in 1993 against a nobody. But of course, by the start of 1994, he only had 1 fight, which was a loss, as said before. And then he went to South Africa to take on Harry Simon. And surprisingly, the judges had it 97-94, with one of them scoring it for Chavez, but the others had it 99-91 and 98-94. I will say though, I tried to look up information. What happened? I tried to find information if there was any fight footage about this or anything else. Was there footage about this? And I know I'm not talking too much about moving forward to his career because I'm just taking my time explaining what his resume was before I get to his big fights. Because I know we're about 13 minutes into this documentary. I don't want to talk too much. But I did try to find his old footages or something back then. But sadly, I couldn't. Which is interesting how I could find his new boxing footages in the 2010s, which that's crazy to say the least, but not footages from his early or late mid-90s. But yeah, yet again, I can't say much about it. And even though he was never promoted in America, doesn't mean he was close from doing it. And we'll get to that moment later. But yeah, that split decision fight became his first legit fight to know what it was like. And then a couple months later, on September 23rd, he takes on a person with 13 wins and 1 loss. And that 1 loss happened sooner, just like his other 2 fights. Just like his fight against the 11-1 fighter, he last lost. Jose Maria Carbel lost his first fight in July 22nd, 2 months before Harry Simon. And he lost that fight against a person with 15-9-2 record by 2nd round TKO in Argentina. Because Jose Maria is from Argentina, and he went to South Africa to take on Simon, which he lost by round 6 TKO. And then he lost another fight soon after, won a nobody fight, had a no contest, and then in 1998, his last fight was a points decision loss, and that was it. So it just seems like that Harry Simon's taken on fighters that lost their first fight or lost their last fight, even if they had an undefeated record, which makes you question. That's a little bit saying, "Oh, I could take on this guy easy," which it just makes you wonder if he was taking it easy. But yet again, I really couldn't say much about that. His 10th professional fight came in April 13th against 29-4 fighter of Paul Wesley. Went by 4 rounds by cornerman retirement, and that was about it for him. But yet again, for everything else, he would later take on in July the 7th. But guys, keep this in mind. As I said before, the end of 1995 will be his last year. He will be in South Africa because, like I said before, his Paul Wesley fight would be his first fight of April 13th out of the country, as he would go to Manchester, UK for the fight. There were no promoters at the time, but don't worry, guys, because guess what? July the 6th, Del Ryan would fight Harry Simon. And he would win by round 6 TKO against a journeyman. Under Frank Warren Promotions. Frank Warren was the promoter that promoted Harry Simon. And he was promoting Harry Simon in his first show on July the 6th, 96, and the second fight in the UK for Harry Simon under the title of Nigel Benn fighting against Steve Collins for the WBO World Super Middleweight title, which ended in a round 4 TKO with Steve Collins winning when Nigel Benn injured his right ankle when falling awkwardly to the canvas after missing with an overhand right later in the round when it turned away and surrendered by the referee. And that is going to be one thing I'm going to talk about in the future. And that was also another show for the WBC World Super Middleweight title, which a underdog fighter also won that title by split decision, and other non-title and other minor weight titles that same time. But yeah, and of course Herbie Hyde was already coming back from that loss. He lost against Riddick Bowe for his WBO title that same night, getting his 27th win after his Riddick Bowe loss. So yeah, July the 6th, 1996 had a lot of interesting moments in the world of boxing for Frank Warren, and Harry Simon was just one of the big push starts in the career of Frank Warren Promotions back in 1996. So, yeah, there's a lot of interesting history here. And better yet, even though his competitors weren't that much other than journeyman fighters and nobodies, Anthony Ivory was a 20-27-2 fighter on August the 31st in the Point of Dublin, Ireland. And the guy's record from 89 to 2006 is 32 wins and 78 losses, 6 draws. And 5 of those losses were by knockout. That's crazy, to say the least. And of course, he's from Chicago and he's known as Poison. Sure. But yeah, consider that was another fight taking place also by Frank Warren that same month, of course, because that was due to the Tom Johnson winning Roman Guzman for the IBF featherweight fight. And of course, Hasim Hamed, when he was 22-0, became 23-0 after his round 11 TKO win against Manuel Medina for the WBO World Featherweight title. So that's also something surprising to talk about. But on February the 8th, 1997, he would take on John Bosco live in the London Arena in Millwall, London. Also under the name of Frank Warren, but also Don King Promotions. That's, okay, well, take that for what you will. And of course, that was when Hasim Hamed defeated Tom Johnson for the IBF title he won, and Robin Reed, that was champion before his controversial of Sven Otka some years later. And Steve Collins retaining his title, and a guy named Jacob Matalala defending his WBO World Light Flyweight that same night. Yeah, the card was packed. And Harry knocked out his opponent in round 2 by KO. So, yeah, not bad for a starter up for what he started doing. It wasn't bad. It wasn't that bad to say the least. But yet again, he was putting in good work for what he was doing. So you gotta give him credit. Like even though Harry Simon's resume wasn't that good, but yet again, he was building up just a little bit. But mm, you do have to think to yourself, things were gonna change. Anyway, guys, even though we're at the 20-minute mark, I might as well have to clear my throat off. And clear my throat off because I have a little bit of recess delight here. I'm not trying to promote this. I already tried to promote my bubble milk tea videos I did last week ago, but no, not a lot of views. Yes, I am trying to promote my products and other stuff, trying to get views and stuff out of it, trying to get some, not just money, but trying to get some views out of it just to get attention to the public. Someone says if you promote your product, you might as well, so that's what I try to do, but I'm not doing it today. Let me just clear my throat while I drink some of this recess. I've never heard about this before. Made with real milk. I don't know. It says iced coffee, but yet again, made with real cream and milk. Huh. I already have a an Oreo cookie one. Trying to take my time. Hmm. Oh, that's good. Let me drink some of the Oreo cookies if you don't mind. You know what? How about we have some fun trying to warm up our legs? Oh yeah, and this is the Oreo cookie delight as well. So who knows? Well, I don't know. It tastes like burnt Oreo cookie with burnt. You know what, guys? Let's just try to stretch out our bodies for a little bit and take a break or something. Where is my pants? You know what, guys? How about we take some time on and just relax a little bit? Just try to take a little bit of a breather or something, if you don't mind. All right. Move around just to get that trash can out of the way. Thank God the floor is not wet anymore. Let's do some 20 push-ups or something. Try to get the blood running. Get the blood running. Ah. I'm gonna do my knees. 14, 15, I gotta look back from the floor right now. 18, 19. I can't do push-ups on cold hard ground. I gotta put carpets down. Yeah, I can't do push-ups on hard cup. I can't do it on flat floors, guys. My hands keep slipping. My pants I'm wearing are not good for exercises. Oh, yeah. Let me wash my hands first. Oh boy. Yeah, there's no way I'm gonna do that again. Can't believe it. 49 episodes of the Mr. Glow podcast, and this is what I get. All right. Yeah, guys, I can't do this on hard floor. I can't do this on floor ground. I might as well do this on carpet next time because my hands keep slipping every time I push. I push down, my hands slip this way, and then I. It's so awkward. It's so awkward to do push-ups. I don't have gym mats, so there's no way I'm gonna do that again. Anyway, let's get down to business, shall we? Dude, and my arms are still hurting like crap right now, but can't say much about that. Okay. So, still love this Oreo. Tastes like burnt Oreo cookie. Huh. Kind of like it because it almost does look burnt. Anyway, let's get down to business. So on May the 3rd, 1997 would be almost of a fight that's even though on BoxRec it says it's a two-star match, but yet again, and I guess it makes sense why when I look it up, but I so he takes on his like I would say his second undefeated fighter, but also with 2 wins. His next fighter would be from Kenya named Nick Odor, a person with 2 wins. 2 wins. And he would win by round 5 KO in a 6-round fight. At 22 years old, and Nick Odor's career was only 3 fights. His first fight was in May the 7th last year. Gets a guy with 28 wins, 5 losses, and a draw. But it was a good resume because Earl McDonald was a top contender back in the days, in the 80s, but he was already past off his prime, even when he was fighting for some titles and title chips, but he was already losing his spunk during his final years in boxing, so... And then his next fight was in September against 38, 18-1 of Hunter Clay, and he was past his prime as well, so... Yeah. And of course, Hunter said he claimed a headache before the last round, so... Yeah, and then Hunter defeated him, and that was it. So, reasons why that's a 2-star fight, I don't know. I don't know. Then his next fight in July 19th would be George Richards at Wembley Stadium. And if you think he's ever been to Wembley Stadium before, well, he might have been there a while. Maybe not longer than how Hulk Hogan said he's been at Wembley before. Well, he was at Wembley back in 1994 during WCW, but not in 1992 SummerSlam with WWF, so keep that in mind. But yeah, of course, at Wembley, that was the show where they had Hasim Hamed, 26-0, defeat Juan Gerardo for the IBF and WBO featherweight title. He retained it. And Harry gets a round 5 win against Richards, and... It wasn't much of another fight. It was just a fight. Now, his resume just didn't seem like he was a top fighter. But of course, by December, he would take on a guy with 15, 12-3 and gets a round 4 KO fight. But yet again, I really don't know if that's good enough. Because at this moment, by the end of 1997, he already emasculated 16 wins. We're already halfway through his career, and we haven't even got to the exciting and controversial parts about his career. Because his next career is going to get more crazier. Because on August the 22nd, 1998, he returns home in South Africa to fight against Ronald Wright for the WBO World Super Welterweight fight. And I don't want to explain the fight that much because it was controversial. And I do apologize for that. The fight was controversial for what it was. they put in a big of 12 rounds. And this was the first 12-round fight for his career, considering if you think that's facts. Because they go into the fight, Harry Simon starts off the fight pretty interesting in the career against 38-1 Ronald Wright. And he's a tough guy from America going to South Africa against the South African of Harry Simon for a title shot. That might raise suspicions for how controversial this is. Because it makes it more surprising to say the least, because he comes out and boxes his way through the first couple rounds, wins them easily. Ronald comes out, wins a good third round, and probably the fourth round for Harry Simon again. And Ronald comes out, and I just saw him. It seemed like he was battering him from round 5, round 6, and barely round 7. And even round 8 was a really tough round for me to give. And I thought it might have been Harry Simon that might have won the fight round, because he got round 9 barely. And then round 10, Ronald Wright comes back, barely squeaking out a little bit of a round 10, in my opinion. And then the 11th round was another round for Ronald. But then in the final round, what I saw, ladies and gentlemen, was really interesting. I really thought Ronald Wright won the 12th and final round because I had it 115-113. But all judges had all the 12th round for Harry Simon, which raises suspicion about that. Because even if Judge Julie Letterman, that was there at the time, did go the 12th and final round for Ronald Wright, then this fight would have been a majority draw. Now, there was another judge that was there that day named Aubrey Rassi that had it 117-113, already giving Harry Simon the win before coming into the 12th and final round. And Manuel Oliver Palomo already gave Harry Simon the last round, tying it 114 even. And Julie had it 115-113, scoring it for Simon. Majority decision, winner. I actually thought Ronald won. And when the judges announced it, because keep this in mind, they announced one of the scorecards was even in the fight. The announcer did announce 2 of the scores were even and one favoring Harry Simon. So when the announcer announced the fight being a draw, Wright defended the title because it's a draw, and he still won the title appomatically. But when it was over, on HBO.com reported when it was over and Wright had played a professor to Simon's unwilling student, when the 3 WBO judges decided that it was a majority draw, 2 of them did, 1 did for Simon, it meant that Wright had retained his title. But a few minutes later, or maybe a half an hour, when he was already in the shower and he was already unwrapping his hands and sitting in the dressing room, one of the officials came to his dressing room and told him that there was an error in the scoring. And he had lost by majority decision. And then they released the scoring for what I just said right now, and no one explained it how they... because one of them said that no one explained it, that there was one person that had at least a 3-point swing in one of the judges' scorings, which was the 117-113. No one had an idea how that happened, while the other 2 scorecards were close. One was even, but the other was 115-113, giving it for Simon. But then in 2012, Wright told KO Digest that the fight overseas was Simon. They called it a draw, and 30 minutes later, they changed the decision for him losing. And considering he fought him in South Africa, his home country, and at first they said it was a draw, he led to his dressing room, took a shower, got dressed, and was ready to leave. And then they said, come back to the ring, and because they changed the decision. from a draw to a loss. And he said, "You all must be crazy if you think I'm going back to the ring." Yeah, and he did. He didn't. Like someone said, he did. This is similar than how Marvin Hagler won his title for the first time when there was a controversial, because Harry Simon did not win the title in the ring. Similar to Marvin Hagler, where there was a story that after he won the fight, a little bit of a controversial way, as someone got hurt and the fight was over, and then people started throwing beer bottles and they got all the reporters out of the way and everyone were leaving. And then days later, they awarded a title to Marvin Hagler inside a building and not to the ring, which was controversial, and it might have felt bad for Hagler because he didn't earn it into the ring. He earned it somewhere else, which is, I don't blame him. So similar to Simon. And yes, the fight did took place in South Africa, and this would be the last time he would fight in South Africa. At the end of the day, I really would say that, because at the end of the day, guys, this is almost like a deja vu situation where South African fighters come to our country in the United States and they try to fight for a title. They do a good job, but then the fight's controversial because they're from South Africa or any other country from Africa. And it makes it controversial because they put their bodies on the line to go to America. They put in a good performance, domination, and then they lose. So I guess this is like karma's a B, if that makes sense. Like I said, I thought, to be honest, you look back at it, I think just karma's such a B, so I just gave it to him. By the way, Frank Warren did not go to South Africa, just like Don King not going to Sun City in 1983 or 84, where he had another fighter to go like Greg Page defeating that South African fighter for the WBA champion, or WBC. Either way, how that title became a little bit ridiculous. And he had another promoter to go there as well. They had a promoter named Ronnie Burnman from the country of South Africa that's still a promoter to this day, but just part-time. Well, now full-time, but yeah. Nothing much to say about that. So, the first fight ends in controversial, but how did his title defenses go? Well, it went pretty differently. He goes back to the UK and takes on Kevin Lushing, and the fight ended as pretty much 21-3 on May the 1st by Frank Warren promoter, and he comes out, throws in amazing, huge, dominating fight. He hurts out his opponent, and they also had Harold Letterman there to be one of the judges that day, so sure, why not? And round 3 by TKO. And then that was the only fight in 1999, just like 1998. He comes in February the 19th, 2000 in Gorsbrook Leisure Centre in the UK against Enrique Areco. And it stated that the fight ended after round 10 because his opponent had retired by a badly swollen eye. And yet again, it was a little bit, well, technically you can watch the fight yourself because of it, but when you look back at it and everything else about, like take this for what you will, because at the end of the day, it was like it was a little bit not much for a story to talk about. I tried to find footage of it, which was kind of crazy if there was, and even when looking up Enrico's name and such, couldn't find it, or maybe it is somewhere. I just didn't type in the right name, I guess. So let me know if we have that fight, because this was the show on Frank Warren Promotions. So they also had other fights that night that were big. So who knows why I can't find this fight, but yeah. Keep this in mind, the WBO is still a minor weight title, so I can't say much as it being a legit title fight back then, but his next fight in September against Ronnie Jones would be his other tough fight in Canada. His first time in America and his last time to ever fight there. Not in the United States, in Canada, but still, close enough. But yet again, to say the least, he did put out a surprising performance. And Rodney Jones and everything else about this, watching back the footage and watching whether anything was whether anything was coming out, because the fight was tough. The fight was starting from start to finish, and it was a great fight. Harry Simon, because at this moment, this fight that he took on Jones at the time was pretty good. Because I think this fight right here also solidified Harry Simon as putting the country Namibia on the map because of this fight. Because he went to North America for the first and sadly the only time in his career, but still. And even though he was inexperienced at the time, but yet again, you can't disagree with his strength and his tough power. That's what got him through in this fight, even though I wouldn't say that Simon was that much of a fighter. Like, he's 19-0, 16 knockouts, but 27 years old, he's still a young dude, but yet again, he would have to be careful about controversial when you're in America. But yet again, there was one person in the comment that did said, Harry Simon, what could have been? And I do think about that pretty interestingly. Yeah, what could have been if he did continue boxing? Well, who knows? Because at the end of the day, we will never know. Guys, I will say though, this fight, it's not my favorite fight because, as said before, there was a lot of moments in this fight, which is also similar to the other fight against Ronald Wright, which I did question that he didn't win the fight. But he did win this fight outright a little bit, but I wouldn't say there's a lot to this fight, to say the least. But other than that, it was an interesting fight. But it might be one of my top 3 fights, barely. But there's not a lot of fights to talk about Harry Simon. But I do barely have a top 3 here, and I'm going to talk about it later. But yet again, you do have to understand, barely trying to prove as a fighter, because the fight didn't go out as a banger. Like I said before, there was some toughness once in a while, but yet again, I wouldn't say there was much to it. Like, he did put in an interesting, tough fight in this, and even though I didn't judge the fight, but judges had it 117 to 111 by 2 judges for Simon. And when I watched the first few rounds, it did look like that Simon had something there. After 6 rounds, I did have it maybe 4-2. Like I said, I did barely watch the full fight, but I never judged it or even know what rounds were won. But I did thought maybe a few rounds were 4-2, and then later in the last rounds, there was one time he might have won a round and then got barely another round or so at the end, and then his opponent did dominate him in the last 2 rounds, which I thought was probably barely winning 7 rounds, barely. Maybe 8, barely, or depending, because his opponent did manage to box him a little bit, but yet again, I didn't really tell much. But I did know that Harry Simon did got the win there. Barely, just barely, but yeah, again, it's up to you viewers to decide. If you viewers think that Rodney Jones won, then that's fine. But yet again, it was a more deserving win than his Ronald Wright fight. But you people decide in the comments if I'm right or wrong. But hey, we're human beings. We make our own changes, and that's all that matters. So, yeah. But then in 2001, he went down low. And as down low, I mean, he didn't get a lot of competition there. His original fighter was going to be Robert Allen on February the 10th. And like I said before, he's still promoted by Frank Warren, even when he was with him in Canada at the time, so keep that in mind. And then they went back to UK in February. But Robert Allen did not participate in the fight. Instead, they had a 15-0 undefeated guy that was actually 24 hours of notice. And that guy that took over for Robert Allen is Wayne Alexander. And Wayne Alexander, became a bummed out fighter. Now, he did become the BBBFC Southern Area Super Welterweight Champion in 1999, and then a year later, he became the BBC of British Super Welterweight. So I can't say much about that. He did got some stripes in those years, but not much of competition, except he did got some good wins, a couple, but after taking on Harry Simon, Simon got the better of him, and by round 5, TKO win. Yeah. Considering I'm talking about this week's after Daniel Dubois left and had Martin Bacall take over him for 2 days' notice, that's just ridiculous. It's ridiculous to say it for the heck of it. It really is. 2 days' notice for Martin Bacall to take the fight for Joseph Parker. Wayne Alexander was 24 hours' notice to take over to fight Harry Simon. That's a little bit ridiculous, to say the least. And this happened on Frank Warren Promotions. And this took place in 2001. That's crazy. But then in July 21st, that same year, Frank Warren would go to Puerto Rico for a world title match of Antonio Margarito and the Daniel Santos, which was the fight for the WBO World Welterweight fight, which took place after the first round when they had accidental headbutt causes with bad cuts to Margarito's right eye. Yeah, the Antonio Margarito, the guy that put plaster in his face, the guy that got his head busted in by, and got a horrific moment with Miguel Cotto and Shane Mosley and Manny Pacquiao. That Miguel Cotto, the cheater, 3-time welterweight cheater. And that was one of the few controversies of Margarito's career. And this took place in Puerto Rico, which is the first time Harry Simon and the only time he would fight in South America against Hassan Sharifi. And this was his debut for the middleweight title. But sadly, this was for the WBO interim world middleweight title. And he did win the fight outright by 119 to 108. 2 of the judges were 117 to 111. But here's the history about the WBO at the time. Now, the WBO World Middleweight title has a lot of fun stuff to talk about, and one of them is this. So we already talked about how Steve Collins became champion, but by 1995, he vacated the belt, even midway at the time, and he went to a different weight class at the time, and which was for the super middleweight WBO title, and retained it from October until March of 95 to October of 97. And then Lonnie Bradley became champion and retained for over 6 times from friggin' of May of 95 to November of 97, and still holds the record for the most champions. And by guys of Otis Grant, but then he stripped as well. And of course, Lonnie Bradley, he stripped his belt in 97, and Grant, well, he stripped it a full year later in 98. With other guys like Bert Scheneck, and then he stripped it due to acute lumbago, whatever you like to call it, that made him lost that WBO title. And so the WBO title in the middleweight at the time in the 90s were just vacant. No one was losing the title. They were losing it by vacant. By the start of the WBO, they had, in the middleweight division, they had 6 vacancies. And the 7th vacancy was already about to happen, where in November of 99, Arman Krajnik, undefeated from Sweden, picks up a win against Jason Matthews, the guy that won the title after Bert Schneck actually vacated the title back in July of 99. 3 days later, he won the title against Ryan Rhodes, but then he lost it in November against Arman Krajnik, and then Krajnik defended the title a couple times, but then the real story becomes how the title got vacant again. And it's just ridiculous. By October 2000, he gets the second title defense, but then in July 28, 2001, he has a non-title fight, which was around the time where Simon already defended out his, well, I'm not going to talk about it. But yet again, he takes a full lead on this one because this is the moment where it, by July, because this was 1 week after the Puerto Rican fight with Harry Simon and his win. So what happened, he retains the belt, but then after his non-title fight in July, he retains it again November the 3rd for a win. But here's the thing. He was vacant the belt because on June the 1st, 1.5 months after, before the Puerto Rican fight, Harry Simon won the interim belt, even though the belt was vacated on June the 4th, almost 2 months before the Puerto Rican fight with Simon. But while in dispute of the Universum Box promotion, because Arman Krajovic was part of the, well, I'm not going to talk about the promotion fights. I've already talked about Frank Warren so many times on this video, so I'm not going to get to that. But however, the WBO unanimously voted on September the 17th, 2001 for Krajovic to remain his belt. Then he defended on November for his third title defense. And then on April the 6th, 2002, he fights it in Denmark against Harry Simon. 26-0 versus 22-0. Swedish versus Nambia. Still. But here's the thing. Consider this was live on United Kingdom Sky, which you can watch this. Frank Warren wasn't there. They had a promoter named Gert Bo Jacobson. And yet again, I can't know much about him other than he was just a person that was just a promoter. And he was known for his one promotion show that might have been the career for Harry Simon. And this guy only became promoter for 10 straight times until October 7th, 2001 to April 17th, 2004. And that was his entire career. But he'll always be known for one boxer that became his final career in a major show. Harry Simon defeats Arman 116 to 113, 116 to 112 by 2 scores. And even though I saw the fight being really, really close, and I did have some interesting rounds once in a while, and Harry Simon, I thought, was on the impact of it, but I had 117 to 111 barely. But yet again, it was a great win. He became WBO World Middleweight Champion, 2-time champion, whether they were minor weight belts. That was also the same show where Johnny Nelson had the world record for the longest title reigns in cruiserweight when he defeated Ezra Sellers by round 8 KO. That same show when Nelson was knocked down in round 4, but came back 4 rounds later to knock his opponent out when his opponent and him were all even off scorecards. So yeah, take that for what you will. And this is the moment where history gets worse because his next professional fight comes in his country of Nambia. He takes on undefeated 7-0 Stephen Zuba in March the 3rd, 2007 by 8-round unanimous decision. Okay. And then his next fight would be in February the 20th, 2010. Okay, now let's get into the history of Harry Simon. Guys, let's get into the history. But guys, before we get to it, let's talk about his controversy outside the ring. Now, guys, some people say that fame can kill us. And fortune could destroy a lot of people, even if they know what they're doing. And sometimes it gets in our head. And I'm sure that that's a sick, unhealthy thing. And it might be a disease. But you just have to live with it. Because in 2001, don't remember what month this was, which this must have happened probably maybe after his fight in Puerto Rico, I'm going to question, where he was involved in a car crash in Swakopmund, Nambia. the coast of Western, where two people died outside of a hit and run accident, where the car was estimated to drive 140 miles, and some controversy when they developed around this accident. Simon was in a car, but we don't know what vehicle he was driving. But blood samples stated that were disappeared, and originally Simon was reported that he was driving at that time. And the driver later admitted to have steered the vehicle and was sentenced to 2 years in prison. When I even clicked on the Wikipedia page at the time for boxer driver, Simon's driver sent to prison over a horror car crash, the Nambian reports stated nothing. Because I couldn't find anything other than a recent information that has nothing to do with it, which means I can't find that information. So, reason why that's not there, I don't know. And this isn't the last time. Because around August of 2005, months after his WBO World Middleweight win, there is video footage of Harry Simon in the 2002 where it stated at the time that he was in a desert or something. There's actually video on YouTube or something that there was actually an interview of him or someone that said that he was out in the desert, or there were videotapes at the time where they were recording during the before aftermath, but I'm trying to find the footage right now. I remember, but I can't find it. I'm trying to find it right now, but no. Come on, just stop trying to find it. Like I'm at the same time. Wait, is this the one? How Namia's former world undefeated Harry tells his story. Huh? Oh, this is the video. Okay, so yeah, the video is called Winky the Trainer, and the video is how Nambia's former world undefeated champion tells his story. And it stated that the video is him interviewing at the time, and it talks about a story, and then they go out to the desert, and then we see they're talking to him in the desert or something for some weird reason, and they drive their car. Whoa. Wait, I think this is the part seen right here, I guess. Wait, let me click on it. Yes. Yes, this is the video I was talking about. Man, this video was uploaded a year and a half ago. Huh, I guess someone re-uploaded it because I remember there was a video a long time ago before COVID came when I saw this video. So I guess someone re-uploaded it. Yeah, so like the British I'm just gonna assume it's a British narrator said that. So yeah, you just heard him. So after his WBO win, he went to take unification fights against Bernard Hawkins and win or lose, retire either way. But like said before, the tragedy became worse. If you think the first accident was bad and how his driver was sentenced to 2 years, this second one did not go well because the second accident got worse. So after the interview and everything else, as they stated, this or that, blah, 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 and him talking about he wanted to unify the titles, life changed when he left, where Simon seriously went out in a Belgian's tourist or something like that, which was near Langstrand, near Langstrand, which is where there was a small beach resort on the Atlantic coast of Western Nambia, where this area took place, and the interviewer and the person that talked to him and this or that, and before the incident happened, where it stated he was driving around in a Mercedes Benz, and he seriously injured and eventually was sent to jail when three Belgian tourists and two adults and a baby died in the collision in November of 2002. But on August the 5th, Simon was given a 2-year jail sentence after he was found guilty of the culpable homicide stemming from the November 2002 car accident, which resulted in a death of 3 people. So, like I said before, and yeah, did they talk about that? I don't feel bad for him because of this, but this is tough. Dang, dude, dude, that is crazy. So yeah, seeing that footage of him driving up the hill off the sand dunes and him sliding the tires and him and those people having fun in the car, man, just goes to show you what a good time can come to an end just like that. This makes sense why it was hard for me to make this podcast because of that. It's ridiculous. So yeah, he came out in result, but by 2007 he would come back in boxing, as I said. But then after March, when he had that fight, past April, May, June, and July the 9th, 4 months after his comeback, Simon began serving 2-year prison sentence for culpable homicide after losing the appeal of his 2005 conviction, and Simon did not call any witnesses or testify in his own behalf during the appeal proceedings, and his conviction and sentence were not overturned. He was released in 2009, which meant on 2010, on February the 20th, he comes back from boxing to fight against Daniel Wyaneo, a guy that's a nobody fight with 2 wins, 3 losses, and a draw, gets him by round 5 TKO. He comes back at the age of 35, which is not much of an age there, but can't say much about that. And then he fights again against a longtime journeyman fighter named Rashid Matumola, 44, 14, and 2 fighter on December the 4th, and beats him by first round knockout. And considering that guy would retire years later in 2013, and he became one of the few fighters that never become champion, but a tough journeyman none the least. But when looking back at it, can't say much about that. He took a year off in 2011 and came back in June the 23rd of 2012. However, when he came back in 2010 in his first pro fight, in his comeback, he was fighting in the super middleweight division when he was 173 pounds and his opponent was 169. Now, his other fight in 2007 and the fight in December of 2010, we don't know because there were no weigh-ins, so we don't know what fight it was, other than the fight in December stated it was a super middleweight fight, and his fight in 2007 was also a super middleweight fight, even though we don't know how much he weighed. But man, oh man, in June of 2012, he weighed at 200 and a half pounds against his opponent, Ruben Grunwald, was 208 and a quarter pounds. And guess what? That fight was a cruiserweight fight, not a heavyweight fight. And Harry beats him by first round TKO in his first and only heavyweight fight, which some people say was actually a cruiserweight fight. And I try to find information of that fight, which is interesting that I do find new footage of his boxing fights in the 2010s, but not all of them. But technically, oh hey, I have. I found one. I found one by a YouTuber called Harry Simon 1 by Helg Schultz. 12 years ago. Interesting. Round victory, huh? Interesting. It's just showing a person talking to the interviewer, but stay. Dang. Man, his brother passed away. Damn, that's sad. So it seems like Harry Simon is already is already going through his demons after what he did in the 2000s. Do I feel bad for Harry Simon? Well, as long as he forgive what he did in the past and knows what he did is wrong, and he's trying to make a good life for himself and trying to help his son out as best he could, just so he won't have his son going through the pains like what happened in the past, then I can respect that. But at least he's actually a changed person, even though he's not as prime anymore. But so I can't find video footage of that fight, but the interview. So can't say much about that. It's weird because on Wiki in BoxRec, it says here that the bout is to be correctly classified as a heavyweight, as former WBO middleweight, super welterweight champion was 27-0. Well, not anymore. But stated that due to them both being over 200 pounds in the limit of Nabia, Simon, 40 at the time, 40? I thought he was less old. Was already lost 5 years of his career since 2002 to 2007 due to prison sentence and the fatal car crashes. And Simon served his sentence with Roy Jones Jr. traveled as a world champion from middleweight to heavyweight. Which is true because Roy Jones was middleweight and super middleweight, but then he became heavyweight after that, that fight with, I won't talk about it, but yeah. But of course, like I said, they talk about his fighting and his wins, this or that, and mostly for everything else, they're just talking about his past and everything and how much money he made, but mostly I can't say much about that, but yeah, I do agree. It should have been a heavyweight fight, but why they call it a cruiserweight, who knows. He did take on Zoltan Kiss, which there is footage online on June the 29th, and he did win by second round TKO of that fight. Yeah, it says Simon's 38 years old. And then 3 months later, his greatest comeback fight of all time was against Gerd Achadovic in his country. And all these fights were from his country at this moment, and he fought big. Well, his first fight coming back in 2010 took place in the country of Kenya, but after that, all his other fights would end in Nambia. But this fight was for the IBF International Light Heavyweight title. And this was the moment that if he won this fight, he was going to go big to take on Bernard Hawkins to be back in the rankings for 2014 if he won this fight. Well, they almost got it. Now, his opponent was WBO European champion back in the day and decade over. And the unbeaten fighter went on in this fight. And it did say that Simon took 3 rounds off from the bout as he paced himself. One judge gave Achadovic 5 rounds from score and prepare for neutral and fair, with landing hard left jabs, combinations to the head. The former champion had everything there, and he went out there like guns blazing. It says that he's 41 years old, but from the fight that started, I see him being 38 years old. So I don't know why his age is that confusing for people. Still, he wins the IBF international title, and when I saw that footage of the fight and him celebrating with his crew and how big this win is, I'm going to tell you guys, this was one of his greatest big wins. It's almost like a George Foreman fight. And he goes 29-0, and then it says he made his bid for a world title shot after this fight, as he re-entered the world rankings to take on Bernard Hopkins in 2014. Simon's defense and foot movement were good, and he appeared very well prepared for the bout. And then, of course, something says right here, by 2014, he also defended it against his rematch opponent, Geard, because as after September, when he defeated Geard Achadovic for the IBF International title, a year later, he defended it against him in 2014. Well, there was footage, and I did remember on BoxRec back in the day that there was going to be a fight. He was going to fight there, but it never happened. So I guess that was misinformation, or maybe he did not feel well, but it never happened. So we don't know why it's there, but this is the moment where it became worse for him, because his time came to an end from this career, because after this, Bernard Hopkins had a chance to continue fighting, because after his win in October, he won out the IBF World Light Heavyweight title, and then won the IBA in April the 19th of 2014, his last win. But then in November the 8th, he lost against Sergey Kovalev. And then 2 years later against Joe Smith Jr. that ended his career. But even though he was 49 years old, it would have been better to see him and Harry Simon the fight there. But we don't know why the fight never took place. We don't know why they didn't have this fight. I would have wished this would have been a good way to send off Harry Simon for a fight. Even if he didn't win, it was still a comeback. But never happened. And Harry Simon's career was done. He tried, but just wasn't meant to be. So in 2016, he did come back with his 30th fight against Jafet Kaseba, and there is footage online that has him. The guy was 5-6, and considering it did say the ex-champion did make a successful comeback, 3 months inactive, but in that fight, it said in the second round or something I saw that his opponent had a leg injury and he was limping, but the referee continued to fight for some reason, only for Simon to beat him up again and have that second round end in a TKO. So why they continue the fight with the guy limping, we don't know. I did find the footage, but it's hard to look it up if you know, but we won't get to that. And then in November the 24th, his first promotion fight was in... Yes. His last professional fight was in a 12-8-1 fighter, but guess what? His son, that was 6-0 at the time, won his 7th professional fight against a nobody jobber in the second round TKO that same show. And his father, Harry Simon Sr., won in first round TKO with his last professional fight. And that was the end of his career. And it's crazy because that was the first time in history, even in history, that we ever had a fought together father and son fighting and both won their fights in the same show. Even with his father, Harry Simon Jr., Sr. being the promoter of that show. So it was great to see them both win. And even though his son did have that split draw last November, a few months ago, but I wish him good luck either way. And that was it. And by 2019, he just took a lot of time off from it and had his son continue boxing. But in 2020, he came up with a published book of lifestyle and treatments in prison, detailing his experience in jail. And there was a little bit of information I tried to find about that, and I couldn't find the book. So if people do have that, give me an article or something, or even see if I can find it, because I do want to read that book. I couldn't find it, but I think it goes to show you Harry Simon is already learning from his experiences and everything else. But as of right now, he is 53 years old as we speak, so he's not in boxing anymore. But it is what it is. Wow. 1 hour and 14 minutes of this podcast. Whew. What a show. Episode 49 was pretty good. I actually like doing this episode. Yeah, so at the end of the day, I think Harry Simon might have learned from his mistakes and went for self. So, yeah, pretty much. Whew. All right, guys. So here is my top 3 fights I will think about Harry Simon. Harry Simon, ladies and gentlemen, I can't say much about him, but yet again, I do have like 4 professional fights on his resume, in my opinion, that were his best fights. And considering with 31 wins, 23 knockouts, 162 rounds in his career with 74.19% knockout ratio, which is almost 1% short than Scott Steiner's 75% chance of winning. By the way, I looked up on Internet Wrestling Database and it said that Scott Steiner had a 61% of winning matches in his career. So, yeah. So that's questionable. But yeah, the 5'10" fighter out of nowhere put in a crazy work in his career, which is pretty interesting to say the least. Guys, if I wanted to do a top 5 list, I would have gotten rid of like Wayne Alexander. But I don't know. I don't know which would be top 4. Rodney Jones, I will say, was a fight that took place in America. I would say that, but guys, I almost want to keep his 2013 win against Geard Achadovic, even though his fighter was 23, 8-1, and he was not at his prime. He was starting to lose fights at the time. But yet again, the IBF International title did brought him back at that time and made a great comeback and a great story moment, but a field story moment. But yet again, I really can't say that much about it. It's still a good fight. But Armand Krajnik, Rodney Jones, and Ronald Wright are like the top 3 fights of his early days when he was champion. Like, one was in South Africa, one was in Canada, and one was in Denmark. It's crazy. And the fights were so close. Rodney Jones, I don't know. I'm not going to keep it. You know what? I'm going to say number 3 is going to be Geard Achadovic because his win in September the 28th, 2013 was still a great fight, great win. I think it should have been deserved to talk about for the heck of it. I did found fight footage of it, and just for the heck of it, it's probably a good way to talk about it because we have to just. Sorry. Like, there is barely some fight footage and stuff about it and the build up to the show, and then there is some moments about it, and there was the announcements and other things, but it was still a feel good story moment to talk about, even though there's not a lot to it. But still, it's still a fight to talk about, to know his history. There's still some fight videos out there that show the fight, so barely. I don't want to put Rodney Jones there because he did had some moments in his career, and Alexander was a 24-hour notice another fight. But Ronald Wright or Armand Krajnik, those are one of the 2 fights is number 2 or number 1. And Rodney Jones is close from being almost number 3 in my opinion because it happened in North America, but I don't know. Is it the Swedish fighter or is it the United States fighter? Because these are 2 fights. Like, Armand and Ronald Wright are just 2 of the fights that were big for it. I'm going to say Armand Krajnik and his WBO World Middleweight title win is number 2, and Ronald Wright is number 1 because of the history and how he won the title and how controversial it was after the fight and how he went on, because that's the only fight fans will always remember of him. Because without that, we would never thought much about who Harry Simon is. If we actually talk about his career, you'll talk about what happened to the fight with Ronald Wright because of that. So I think it's probably for the best to say that. So yeah, Ronald Wright, Armand, and Geard Gerard for the IBF light heavyweight fight in 2013. Those are my top 3 fights. So yeah, Ronald Wright and his WBO Super Welterweight title win and his WBO World Middleweight title win in 2002 is my second fight, and the third fight in 2013 is number 3. Rodney Jones, almost number 3 in my opinion, just almost, but yet again, there's not a lot of great fights about Harry Simon, but in my opinion, those are the best fights to talk about if you want to know about him. And history-wise, 24 years of competition, you can't say much about that. But yet again, I will say, though, was he the greatest fighter? From South Africa, he did put the country on the map and everything else about it in his career, so you gotta give him credit for that. But yet again, I think it was worth the best to talk about, and I kind of enjoy it for what it was, and it seems like it was a good, it's actually a perfect pick for me. I just think that's the best pick, so that's all I have to say about this entire episode. So thank you, viewers, for watching this. 1 hour and 20 minutes. Jeez. Whew. That's a lot. But anyway, thank you, viewers, for watching this entire podcast episode. Episode 49 in the books. But next Thursday, ladies and gentlemen, as this video is uploaded, we're going to do the 50th episode of the GLOAT podcast. I don't know what I'm going to be doing. I'm going to try my best to build things up. So with that being said, thank you for watching this. And the Foxwolf says, out.